So, I don't even know where to start with this shit. I'm literally still shaking typing this out. And it just happened yesterday. My grandpa turned 80 this weekend, and even though we've had our differences, I've always respected him. When my dad texted me about the big celebration at Giovanni, this fancy Italian place my family loves, I knew I had to be there. For context, my family has this medical supply business that my grandpa started like 40 years ago. My dad and Uncle Tony run it now. And everyone expected me to join up after college, but I couldn't stomach working with them daily. They're literally the most toxic people I know. So, I became a pharmacy tech instead. Not glamorous, but I like helping people, and it's honest work. Ever since I betrayed the family legacy, they've been treating me like garbage. Anyway, I live about 5 hours away, and there was this massive blizzard warning. I checked the weather app like every hour, trying to time my drive between the worst bands of snow. I woke up at 5 a.m. to get on the road early. The drive was insane. White-knuckled the whole way. My old Subaru sliding around, semi-jackknifed on the highway. Took me almost 8 hours instead of 5. But I made it. I even stopped at this card shop and got a really thoughtful birthday card. Added a gift card to this fancy whiskey shop Grandpa likes. Not expensive, but personal, you know. I ironed my good shirt, put on my one decent pair of pants that aren't scrubs. So, I finally pull into Giovanni's parking lot, literally exhausted, but relieved I made it. I check my hair in the mirror, grab Grandpa's card, and head in. The hostess gives me this weird look when I say I'm there for the Hayden party. She's like, "Oh, they've been here for over an hour already. They said no one else was coming." Something in her voice made my stomach drop. I can see through the archway into the private room, and there they all are. Mom, Dad, Uncle Tony, my brother, my cousin's grandpa at the head of the table. 15 people all dressed up, champagne glasses raised, laughing their asses off about something. They started without me. They weren't even waiting for me after I fought through a fucking blizzard to get there. I'm standing there like an idiot when my dad notices me. The look on his face wasn't surprise. It was annoyance. Like I'd interrupted something important. He gets up and storms toward me, grabbing breadsticks from a passing waiter's tray. He comes right up to me and says something like, "You actually showed up. Christ, you're even more pathetic than we thought." His voice was loud enough that people at nearby tables turned to look. Before I could even answer, my mom staggers over with her wine glass, clearly on her 3rd or 4th drink. She's looking me up and down with this disgusted expression. "Everyone, come see our family clown," she announces. Then she points at my shirt, which I had carefully ironed. "Is that your nice shirt? Did you iron it with a rock?" My little brother, he's 30 but still the baby of the family, comes over laughing. He grabs the card from my hand and waves it around. He brought a dollar store card. What's inside? Food stamps. Still think you're part of this family? By now, I'm completely in shock. People in the restaurant are staring. The hostess is pretending to organize menus but clearly listening. Uncle Tony, who always has to one-up everyone, decides to join in. "My janitor makes more than you. My janitor has a better life." He's literally spitting as he says this. That's how worked up he is. My dad, not to be outdone, adds, 30 years old, scanning barcodes at Walmart, driving that death trap. "You're a walking advertisement for birth control." I try to explain that I'm a pharmacy technician, not a Walmart cashier, but they're not even listening. They're just piling on. Each insult worse than the last. I don't even know where all this hatred is coming from. Like, I know they've always looked down on me for not joining the family business, but this level of public humiliation was something else. Then, and I still can't believe this part, my dad pulls out his wallet and starts throwing coins at my feet. Actual coins, like I'm some beggar on the street. "For gas and whatever fast food trash you'll choke down alone tonight," he says. My mom and uncle join in, tossing quarters and dimes that bounce off my shoes and roll across the restaurant floor. People are openly staring now. A waiter dropped a plate somewhere. I can see my grandpa through the doorway, not even looking in our direction, just sipping his wine like nothing's happening. In that moment, something broke inside me. But not in a sad way, in a fuck all of you forever kind of way. All the years of trying to please these people, of making excuses for them, of thinking maybe someday they'd accept my choices. It all just evaporated. I looked my dad straight in the eyes and said, "You'll regret this. Every last one of you." Not yelling, not crying, just stating a fact. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, I could hear them laughing like my promise was the funniest joke they'd heard all day. I got in my car and just sat there for a while. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't even put the key in the ignition. Not from sadness or fear, but from pure rage. These people have been putting me down my whole life because I didn't want to be part of their toxic business. My dad's always resented that I take after my mom's side of the family. He thinks I'm weak because I care about people more than money. I drove to a hotel and got a room for the night since the roads were still terrible. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened, about how they planned this. They knew I was coming. Dad had texted earlier saying, "Grandpa's begging to see you." They wanted me to show up just so they could humiliate me. You know what's really messed up? As I was leaving, I glanced back and saw my cousin Leah, the only decent one in the family, looking horrified. She tried to follow me out, but Uncle Tony grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "I've spent the night researching exactly what I'm going to do. I know things about the family business that could cause serious problems. I know secrets that would devastate my dad's reputation in the industry. And most importantly, I remember something my grandpa told me years ago that they don't know about. Tomorrow, I'm driving to see Grandpa's lawyer. Then I'm heading to the bank. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. They think I'm pathetic. Fine. Let's see how they feel when I'm done with them. I'll update when things start moving. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Update 1. Narration continues seamlessly. First, thanks for all the support on my last post. I honestly didn't expect so many people to care about my situation. I've been reading your comments while putting my plan into action, and things have developed in ways I never expected. So, after that disaster at Giovanni, I spent the night in this crappy motel because of the blizzard. Barely slept. Just kept replaying everything in my head. The coins hitting the floor, my dad's smug face, everyone laughing. I woke up early and decided to drive to my grandpa's house instead of heading straight home. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving town without them. When I got there, no one was home, which was perfect. Grandpa has this spare key hidden in this fake rock that's been in the same spot for like 20 years. I know that sounds sketchy, but it's not like I was breaking in. I've been using that key since I was a teenager. Whenever I visited, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Like something was off. There were pill bottles everywhere. Way more than the last time I visited a few months ago. I started looking through them and realized Grandpa's health was way worse than anyone had told me. Heart medication, blood pressure stuff, some serious painkillers. While I was looking around, I noticed his office door was open. Grandpa never leaves that door open. It's like this unspoken rule. Nobody goes in there without him. But something made me walk in. His desk was a mess of papers, medical bills, business documents, and this folder labeled final arrangements. I know I probably shouldn't have opened it, but after what happened, I didn't really care about respecting boundaries anymore. Inside were his will, funeral plans, and this document from like 7 years ago that literally made my jaw drop. It was a medical power of attorney form with my name on it. Not my dad's, not Uncle Tony's. Mine. I remember Grandpa mentioning something about this years ago, but I thought he was just talking. I never knew he actually went through with it. There was a letter attached written in his shaky handwriting explaining that he trusted me more than anyone else to make the right decisions if he couldn't. That he knew I wouldn't be influenced by money or business interests like the rest of the family. As I'm standing there trying to process this, I hear a car pull up. I quickly put everything back except I took pictures of the power of attorney document with my phone. Just as I closed the office door, my grandpa walked in with his home health aide. He seemed surprised to see me but not upset. The aide excused herself to go prepare his medications and we sat in the living room. Grandpa looked so much older than at the restaurant, more fragile. I asked him straight up about what happened at Giovanni's. Did he know they were planning to humiliate me like that? He looked confused, so I told him everything. The coins, the insults, all of it. His face changed as I talked. He got really quiet, then asked if I was making this up. I showed him a video I took on my phone as I was walking out of the restaurant. You can clearly hear my dad and Uncle Tony laughing and making more comments about me. Grandpa just stared at the screen. Then he said something that explains so much. Apparently, my dad told him I had refused to come to his birthday because I was too busy, didn't care about family anymore. They had been telling him for years that I was disrespectful, lazy, and ungrateful. That I had cut them off, not the other way around. He'd been believing their shit this whole time. Grandpa asked if I knew about the medical power of attorney. I lied and said no because I didn't want to admit I'd been snooping. He said he'd been meaning to talk to me about it, but my dad had been intercepting his calls to me, literally blocking him from contacting me directly for years. Just as we were talking, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Where the hell are you? You better not still be in town." Then another one. "If you're bothering your grandfather with your pathetic sob story, I swear to God, I'll make your life even more miserable." I showed Grandpa the texts. His hands were shaking. He pressed this button on the side table and the home health aide came back in. He asked her to call his lawyer, Mr. Greenberg, and have him come over immediately. Then he asked me to stay for dinner. While we waited for the lawyer, Grandpa started telling me things about the family business I never knew. How Dad and Uncle Tony had been making decisions he didn't approve of, taking risks with company money, cutting corners on quality control. He'd been trying to rein them in, but his health was making it harder to stay involved. Mr. Greenberg arrived around 6. He's this older guy, probably in his 60s, with these thick glasses and a bow tie. Looked exactly like what you'd expect a family lawyer to look like. Grandpa introduced me, then asked to speak to him privately. They were in the office for like an hour. I just sat in the living room scrolling through Reddit TBH, trying not to freak out about what was happening. When they finally came out, Mr. Greenberg handed me his business card and said we needed to schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning. After he left, Grandpa seemed different, more determined. He asked me if I still had the spare key to his house. When I said yes, he told me to keep it. Then he asked me if I would consider moving back to town for a while to help him with some things. Not permanently, just temporarily. I was literally about to answer when the front door opened. My dad walked in without knocking. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting there with Grandpa. The look on his face was priceless, like he'd seen a ghost. Then it changed to this cold anger I've known my whole life that he started in immediately asking what lies I'd been telling, saying I was manipulating Grandpa when he was vulnerable. But before he could really get going, Grandpa did something I've never seen before. He stood up, which is hard for him now, and pointed to the door. His voice was different, harder. He told Dad that he knew what happened at the restaurant, that he'd seen the video, that he was ashamed to call him his son right now. Dad tried to explain, saying they were just joking around, that I was being too sensitive as usual. Grandpa wasn't having it. He said, "Get out of my house. We'll discuss this at the office tomorrow." Dad looked at me with pure hatred like this was all my fault. As he was leaving, he shoulder-checked me hard, knocking me into the wall. After he left, Grandpa apologized. Actually apologized to me. Said he had no idea things had gotten this bad between us, that he'd been lied to for years. He seemed genuinely upset. The next morning, I met with Mr. Greenberg at his office. That's when I found out exactly how much power I actually had. Not only was I Grandpa's medical power of attorney, but he had also made me a trustee on some of his most valuable assets, including the building where the family business operates, the building that my dad and Uncle Tony had been using as collateral for loans without Grandpa's knowledge. Mr. Greenberg explained that Grandpa had amended his will last night. He wouldn't tell me all the details, but he did say that my dad and Uncle's control over the business was now contingent on a lot of conditions they wouldn't like. As I was leaving the lawyer's office, my phone blew up with texts from Dad, Mom, Uncle Tony, even my brother. They must have just come from a meeting with Grandpa. The messages ranged from threats to sudden attempts at reconciliation. "Dad, you manipulative little snake. You have no idea what you've done. Mom, please call me. We need to talk about your grandfather. I'm worried about his mental state. Uncle Tony, whatever he promised you, it's not going to happen. We have rights, too. My brother, dude, what did you say to Grandpa? Dad is losing it. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I drove to the bank where Grandpa has his personal accounts. He had called ahead. They were expecting me. I won't go into all the details, but basically, I now have signatory authority on accounts they didn't even know existed. I'm staying at Grandpa's house for now. He's asleep in the other room as I type this. Tomorrow, we're going to the family business together. I'm going to sit in Grandpa's chair at the head of the conference table and I'm going to watch their faces when they realize exactly how much power I now have. The best part, this is completely legal. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just finally taking the place that was apparently meant for me all along. They thought throwing coins at me was funny. Let's see how they feel when I control their paychecks. Update 2. Hey Reddit, it's been about a week since my last update, and holy shit, things have escalated fast. I've been staying at my grandpa's house this whole time, sleeping in my old bedroom from when I used to visit during summers as a kid. Feels weird, but also right somehow. That meeting at the family business I mentioned, it was fucking glorious. I showed up with Grandpa and Mr. Greenberg, his lawyer, right on time. Everyone was already there, Dad, Uncle Tony, my brother, some board members I barely know. The look on their faces when I walked in and sat in the chair right next to Grandpa instead of at the far end of the table where they expected me. I wish I could have framed it. Dad immediately started talking over Grandpa, saying this was a private business meeting and I had no place there. Mr. Greenberg slid a folder across the table and told him he might want to review the updated corporate documents before continuing. I've never seen my dad go pale so fast. Turns out Grandpa had signed paperwork making me an acting director with voting rights equal to my dad and Uncle Tony combined. And the best part, it was retroactive to the start of the year, which means a bunch of decisions they made without proper approval were technically invalid. Uncle Tony literally started sweating through his fancy dress shirt. My brother kept looking back and forth between Dad and me like he was watching a tennis match. One of the board members, this old guy who's been friends with Grandpa forever, started laughing, just straight up cackling until everyone stared at him. Dad tried to argue that Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he signed the papers. That's when Mr. Greenberg played the recording of Grandpa's medical evaluation from 2 days ago, confirming he was totally competent. Dad had no idea the evaluation had even happened. After the meeting, I went through the company books with Grandpa and the accountant. Found some seriously questionable stuff, like the time Dad used company funds to pay for my brother's DUI lawyer last year, or how Uncle Tony had been paying his daughter's entire college tuition through a fake scholarship program that only she ever qualified for. That afternoon, I made my first big move. I froze the slush fund they'd been using for all this personal crap, completely legal. It just required my signature as a director to confirm the fund's activity was under review. My phone blew up with texts from my brother within the hour. WTF did you do? Dad says the cards aren't working. This isn't funny, Kyle. I have bills due tomorrow, you fuck. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I started going through the client list with Grandpa. He pointed out this big account, like their biggest client that Uncle Tony managed personally. I decided to take a closer look. Uncle Tony had been charging them almost twice what our other similar clients paid, then pocketing the difference through some complicated billing scheme. I documented everything, then called the client directly and asked for a meeting. I drove 3 hours to their headquarters the next day, brought all the evidence, explained who I was, that I'd recently taken a more active role in the family business and had discovered the overcharging. I offered to honor the lower rate and give them a credit for the difference going back 6 months. The purchasing manager was obviously pissed, but seemed impressed that I'd come clean instead of hiding it. We negotiated for like 2 hours. By the end, I'd saved the account, but on my terms. I made it clear that I would be their new point of contact, not Uncle Tony. When I got back to Grandpa's house, Uncle Tony was waiting in the driveway. He got out of his car, This ridiculously overpriced European thing that probably costs more than my annual salary, and blocked my way to the door. He was trying to be intimidating, standing too close and talking about family loyalty. How dare I go behind his back to his client? Did I know how hard he'd worked to build that relationship? I just looked him straight in the eye and asked if he wanted me to call the client right then and explain exactly how he'd been overcharging them all these years. His face went from angry to panicked in about 2 seconds. That's when he switched tactics, trying to act all concerned about Grandpa, saying I was manipulating an old man for my own benefit. That everyone was worried about me suddenly showing up after barely visiting for years. I played him the recording of my dad at the restaurant, the one where he's literally throwing coins at my feet and calling me a walking advertisement for birth control. Uncle Tony got really quiet. Then I showed him my calendar app with all the times I'd tried to visit Grandpa over the past few years and the text from Dad saying Grandpa was too tired or not feeling up to visitors, dozens of them. He tried one last angle offering me money, a consulting fee to help smooth things over. I laughed in his face and told him he might want to start saving his money instead. He'd need it. The next day, I went through all the company's vendor contracts, found this one supplier that was charging way above market rate. Guess who owned it? Uncle Tony's golf buddy. I immediately sent out requests for competing bids to 3 other suppliers. By Friday, I had negotiated a new contract with a different vendor that would save the company almost 15%. When I presented it at the emergency board meeting Dad had called, probably hoping to have me removed, even his allies had to admit it was a good deal. After the meeting, my mom called. First time I'd heard from her directly since the restaurant. She was using her sweet voice, the one she uses when she wants something. Asked if I could come over for dinner. Said we needed to talk as a family. That she missed me. I told her, sure, I'd come over, but I was bringing Grandpa. She got real quiet, then said, maybe another time would be better. I told her that was fine, but she should know I'd found the second set of company books. She hung up on me. The second set of books was actually my bluff. I suspected they existed, but hadn't found them yet. Her reaction pretty much confirmed it. Sunday morning, I got a text from my cousin Leah asking if we could meet for coffee. She's the only one in the family who seemed uncomfortable with how they treated me at the restaurant. I was cautious, but agreed. We met at this little cafe downtown. She looked nervous, kept checking her phone, finally admitted that Dad and Uncle Tony had asked her to try to talk some sense into me. They promised to help with her student loans if she could get me to back off. I wasn't even mad at her. Asked her how much she owed. When she told me, I pulled out my phone, logged into one of Grandpa's accounts that I now had access to, and transferred her the exact amount, told her she didn't owe anyone anything anymore. She started crying right there in the cafe. Then she told me something I didn't know. Apparently, the real reason my dad has always hated me is because he suspected I wasn't his biological kid. Mom had an affair right before she got pregnant with me. And I look more like her side of the family, while my brother looks exactly like Dad. I honestly don't know if it's true, but it would explain a lot. Why he's always favored my brother. Why he resented me not joining the family business. Why he was so eager to humiliate me. Later that day, Grandpa and I were having dinner when he got a call from his friend who sits on the board of the country club where Dad and Uncle Tony are members. Apparently, they were there right now, bad-mouthing us to anyone who would listen, saying Grandpa had dementia, and I was taking advantage of him. Grandpa was livid. He insisted we go there immediately. I drove us over, helped him walk in with his cane. The place went silent when we entered the dining room. Dad and Uncle Tony were at a table with some other members, drinks in hand. Mid-conversation, Grandpa walked straight up to their table in a voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. He said he was disappointed to learn that his son and nephew were spreading lies about his mental state, that he was of sound mind, as his recent medical evaluation confirmed, and that anyone who had questions about the family business should direct them to him or his grandson, me, who was now taking a more active role in the company's management. Then he handed business cards to everyone at the table. Cards I didn't even know he had made, with my name and assistant director printed on them. Dad looked like he was going to have a stroke. Uncle Tony stared into his whiskey glass like it might contain an escape route. As we were leaving, Grandpa stopped at the reception desk and asked to see the membership records. Then, right there in front of everyone, he transferred his club membership to me. The membership that Dad had been using for business meetings for years because he couldn't afford his own. On the drive home, Grandpa told me he was calling an emergency family meeting for tomorrow night. Everyone would be there. Mom, Dad, Uncle Tony, my brother, even some extended family. He wanted to clear the air once and for all. I asked if he wanted me there. He squeezed my hand and said, "Only if you want to be, but either way, they're going to know exactly where I stand." I haven't decided if I'm going yet. Part of me wants to see their faces when Grandpa lays it all out. Part of me thinks it might be more powerful if I don't show up, if I let him speak for me instead. But one thing's for sure, I'm not done with them yet. Not even close. They haven't even begun to feel what it's like to be humiliated the way they humiliated me. I'll update after the family meeting, whether I attend or not. This is just getting started. Final update. Okay, this is going to be a long one. Shit has been absolutely wild since my last update. I decided to go to Grandpa's family meeting after all. No way I was missing the opportunity to watch everyone squirm in person. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at Grandpa's house. I showed up early to help him set up. He seemed tired but determined, arranging chairs in the living room like he was preparing for some kind of tribunal, which I guess he kind of was. By 6:45, people started arriving. My cousin Leah came first, giving me a quick hug and whispering good luck before taking a seat. Then Aunt Patricia and her husband, a few other relatives I barely talked to. Uncle Tony arrived next, deliberately avoiding eye contact with me while checking his phone every 30 seconds like he was expecting some urgent message that would save him. My brother showed up at exactly 7 o'clock, looking hungover and pissed off. He tried to give me this intimidating stare, but just looked constipated, tbh. The real surprise was my parents arriving separately. Dad walked in at 7:05. Mom at 7:15. They sat on opposite sides of the room. I've literally never seen them enter a room separately in my entire life. Something was definitely up. Grandpa started by thanking everyone for coming. His voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years. He explained that recent events had brought some serious issues to light and it was time for the family to face some uncomfortable truths. He played the video of my dad and the others humiliating me at the restaurant. The one with the coins hitting the floor and all the insults. Watching everyone's reactions was fascinating. Aunt Patricia gasped. Cousin Leah looked at the floor. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Uncle Tony stared at the ceiling like it was suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. Mom though. Mom started crying. Not quiet tears. Full-on sobbing. I expected to feel satisfaction seeing her cry, but it was just weird. Grandpa asked if anyone wanted to explain why they thought this behavior was acceptable. The silence was so thick you could literally cut it with a knife. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and started with this bullshit about how I'd abandoned the family business, how I'd been disrespectful, how they were just trying to teach me a lesson about family loyalty. That's when Grandpa dropped the first bomb. He pulled out a folder and started reading emails between Dad and Uncle Tony going back years. Emails where they discussed keeping me away from Grandpa, cancelling visits I'd arranged, lying about my life choices. Dad tried to interrupt, but Grandpa held up his hand. The look he gave Dad would have made a drill sergeant back down. Then Grandpa addressed the financial stuff. The fake scholarship for Uncle Tony's daughter, the slush fund, the overcharging of clients, the vendor kickbacks. He laid it all out with dates and dollar amounts. Uncle Tony's face went from red to purple. My brother looked like he was going to throw up. Mom kept crying through all of it. I still couldn't figure out why she was so upset. This was about Dad and Uncle Tony's shady business dealings, not her. When Grandpa finished detailing the financial improprieties, he looked directly at Mom and said, "I think it's time to discuss why Michael has always treated Kyle differently." That's when I realized this wasn't just about the business. This was about everything. Mom stood up, mascara running down her face, and admitted it. She'd had an affair 33 years ago with Uncle Tony's college roommate. 9 months later, I was born. The room went completely silent. I sat there trying to process that my dad might not be my biological dad. That the man who'd been treating me like shit my entire life wasn't even my father. Dad stood up, fist clenched. For a second, I thought he was going to hit Mom. Instead, he just said, "I've always known." He looked at me with this weird mix of hatred and something else. Maybe relief that the secret was finally out. He said he'd suspected from the day I was born that I looked nothing like him or his side of the family, that Mom had confessed during a fight when I was 5, then taken it back the next day, but he'd never believed her denial. Uncle Tony jumped in saying he'd had nothing to do with the affair, that he'd only found out years later that it wasn't his fault. Grandpa cut him off, said he'd known for years, too, that it didn't matter to him. I was still his grandson, blood or not. That's when my brother lost it. Started yelling about how this explained everything. Why I got special treatment from Grandpa. Why I was always the favorite despite turning my back on the family business. Dad tried to calm him down, but he wasn't having it. My brother grabbed his keys and stormed out, slamming the door so hard one of Grandpa's framed photos fell off the wall. Mom tried to approach me, still crying, saying she was sorry that she'd wanted to tell me so many times. I just stared at her. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for dropping this bomb in the middle of a family meeting. Dad watched her, then suddenly said something that explained so much. He admitted he'd never been able to look at me without seeing Mom's betrayal, that he'd tried to love me like his own son at first, but every time I did something that reminded him of Mom's side of the family, all he could think about was her affair. He said joining the family business had been his test for me. If I truly wanted to be his son, I would follow in his footsteps. When I chose a different path, it confirmed what he'd always suspected, that I wasn't really his. The room felt like it was spinning. 32 years of being treated like an outsider in my own family suddenly made sense. It wasn't about my career choices. It was about my DNA. But Grandpa wasn't done. He stood up again, leaning on his cane, and announced that in light of everything that had been revealed, he was making significant changes to both the family business structure and his will. Effective immediately, Dad and Uncle Tony were being removed as managing directors. They would remain on the board, but without executive authority. I would be taking over as interim COO until a permanent leadership structure could be established. Dad started to protest, but Grandpa cut him off. He said the decision was final. The paperwork had already been filed that morning. Then he addressed the personal side. He announced that he was changing his will to establish a trust for the family business. I would be the primary trustee with Leah as the secondary. The business would not be divided among family members as previously planned. Instead, it would remain intact under the trust control. Each family member would receive a yearly distribution based on a formula that considered both their financial needs and their contributions to the family's well-being. Those who had demonstrated dishonesty or cruelty would receive the minimum. Uncle Tony couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up red-faced and started accusing Grandpa of being manipulated by me, that I'd swooped in after years of absence and turned him against his own son. That's when Grandpa reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a DNA test from 6 years ago. He'd had himself, me, and Dad tested secretly during a family reunion. It confirmed what Mom had admitted. Dad wasn't my biological father. But here's the kicker. Grandpa did it because he wanted to make sure I was included in the will and business succession plan. Despite the rumors he'd heard about my parentage, he wanted proof that I was family one way or another. And when he got the results, he decided it didn't matter. I was his grandson regardless. Dad looked absolutely shattered. All these years, he'd used my questionable paternity as an excuse to treat me like dirt. And all along, Grandpa had known the truth and still chosen to include me. The meeting broke up soon after. People left in small groups, whispering to each other. Uncle Tony stormed out alone. Mom tried to talk to me again, but I told her I needed time. Dad was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at me. For once, there was no anger in his eyes, just exhaustion and maybe a hint of regret. He didn't say anything, just nodded slightly and walked out. After everyone left, it was just me and Grandpa. He looked drained but satisfied, like he'd finally set something right that had been wrong for decades. We sat in silence for a while. Then he handed me a set of keys to the main office. Said he'd see me there tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, life has been a weird mix of chaos and clarity. I've been working at the family business, learning everything I can. The staff were confused at first, but most of them seem relieved to have clear leadership. Dad hasn't fought the changes. He shows up to board meetings, says little, leaves immediately after. Uncle Tony tried to challenge the restructuring legally, but backed down when his lawyer explained the documents were ironclad. My brother hasn't spoken to me. Mom keeps texting, asking to meet. I'm not ready yet. Yesterday was Grandpa's redo birthday dinner at the same restaurant, Giovanni's, just him and me. The hostess recognized us, looked nervous until we explained it was just the two of us this time. We had a good dinner, talked about the business, about family, about the future. As we were leaving, Grandpa handed me an envelope. Inside was a card, the same kind I'd bought him for the original disaster dinner, but instead of a gift card, there was a check. A big one, enough to buy a new car to replace my death-trap Subaru. The memo line just said, "For being the man they never gave you credit for becoming." I drove him home in my old car. For some reason, I'm not in a rush to replace it now. It got me through that blizzard after all. It's been reliable when nothing else was. This morning, I sat across from Dad in a budget meeting. For the first time ever, he actually listened to my ideas. Didn't agree with all of them, but actually engaged instead of dismissing me. I don't know if we'll ever have a real father-son relationship. Too much water under that bridge. But maybe we can have a professional one. Maybe that's enough. As for Mom and the others, I'm taking it day by day. The trust is set up. The business is running smoothly. And every time I sign off on their reduced distributions, I think about those coins hitting the floor at Giovanni. They wanted to treat me like I didn't belong. Fine. Now I'm the one who decides what they deserve. And unlike them, I'll be